Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Elven Magic, Dwarven Steel, and Human Blood. Written by Whiskey Lullaby. I am often asked how we won the Great War. How we faced down endless hordes of our mutated, maddened brethren, the living dead, and monsters from beyond our understanding. The answer is frustratingly simple. Elven magic, dwarven steel, and endless lakes of human blood. Of the many races of the Alliance, only humanity had the numbers to hold the line, and as much as it burns me to admit it, they had more courage than any one of my elven soldiers, and more of a stubborn streak than the greyest of grey-bearded dwarves. Where the rest of us focused on building great fortresses and honing our magic, or building great war machines and crafting rune weapons, other humans simply dug into the ground like ants. They spread barbed wire, built hasty bunkers and defensive lines, and filled them with rifles and machine guns. Behind their lines they set up great cannons, some of which were brought, borrowed, or outright stolen from dwarven armories. My compatriots looked down on them. With our great bows and powerful magic, they thought our troops were invincible. The first assault against the Dark Keep taught them differently. Our knights were shattered by twisted reflections of dwarven runecasters. Our mages were corrupted from the inside out by blood rituals of fallen priests. And our troops were driven back by tides of flesh as the dead and the mad swarmed into them. Lord Alforcia fell on his own sword after reading the reported casualties. The dwarves and their machines did no better. Their great land ships outpaced their infantry and were swarmed, boarded, and turned against their former comrades. 3 whole clans lost their sons that day. The Faefolk and the Beastmen were driven out of the kingdoms after only a few days, millions streaming past the defensive lines of the humans. We were furious at first, demanding that they send out an attacking force. Their supreme commander at the time, Frederick von Andolphus, simply shook his head. "We are heavily outnumbered, and there is far too much ground on the plains and hills to adequately cover. We'd overextend, and one good punch would leave our rear undefended, our front line encircled, and open a gaping hole straight to our hearts. If you would simply build your defense and several fallbacks in line with our own, we could not only support one another, but bottleneck the enemy. Our navies and the skills of the merfolk could easily keep the enemy from making any significant naval landings due to the terrain. We could turn half the continent into a fortress and bleed the enemy forces dry just from holding the Shatterspine Mountains and the gaps between them." Thus was born War Plan Hedgehog. There was much arguing, months of lost time, with more and more surrounding nations warning. I was skeptical of the humans' plans, and, to my shame, I dragged my feet. It wasn't until the enemy had reached the humans' first line that I realized how effective it was, and how costly to his own people. I arrived with reinforcements at the tail end of the fighting. There were mountains, corpses, tired-looking human troops pouring oil over them and setting them alight. They were filthy, their trenches filled with mud from the blood. I remember the chill that went down my spine when I saw that everything before the trenches was tattered and ruined. The moonscape of shell holes and ruined bodies, the trembling, didn't start until I saw that things had gotten so desperate that they'd shelled their own trench. They'd paid a steep price for their victory, around 120,000 across the whole line. But they'd killed almost 10 times that number. The plan was finally approved the day after. Excerpt from the War Diaries of Knight Commander Sindarian, hero of Whitevale. End of story. Story number 2. Self Reliance, written by LG Father Anthracite. When the Eskimo built their space elevator, they reached out to the Lefren for aid. The Lefren are renowned for their design and engineering ability. When the Lefren built their grand central space station, they contacted the Bremph to help design the life support and waste recycling systems, as the Bremph were the experts in such critical systems. In the collective, a great many species were often called upon to provide their technical expertise, which is not to say there were no Lefren life support specialists or Eskimo engineers, but when you have an expert, you ask them. It was the way of things in the collective. Everyone supported each other, providing assistance and expertise to each other. Making a name for your species as specialists, and something was fairly common amongst collective member species. Humans were always there, performing as members of the collective. They were laborers, technicians, system assemblers. Like many species, humans had a wide range of abilities, and often shared their efforts with others. For a long time, no one noticed. No one noticed because people worked with humans all the time. Humans were always around. They were, as a species, well integrated into the collective. A thriving, vibrant culture full of people who were willing and able to do great many jobs. But one day, a Grebnel ambassador, in the midst of writing a speech to the collective council, tried to remember a single human engineering project that used a foreign expert. But he couldn't think of any. He sent an aide to research it, and surely there had been some example that he could put into his remarks. His aide came back 42 cycles later and reported that there was no known instance of humans seeking outside help for any of their massive infrastructure projects. To be sure, they had hired from all collective species for all manner of labor, administration, and support, but no consultations with the Lefren regarding their engineering, no asking the Wymyuk specialists regarding terraforming a new colony planet, aside from checking to make sure that the designs met health and safety regulations for all collective species. They had never collaborated with anyone. In the century-long history of the collective, humanity was the only species to never have asked for assistance with designing, building, or implementing anything. The Grebnel ambassador scheduled a meeting with his human counterpart. After the formalities were observed, he asked if there was a reason that the humans had never done an outside consultation on one of their projects. The human ambassador, to his credit, honestly thought that there must be some sort of error. He sent one of his aides to retrieve any data on human-alien collaboration projects. The aide returned, empty-handed. The ambassador apologized to the Grebnel ambassador and said that he was talk to his government and see why no such action had happened before. After several months of chasing down leads and scheduling FTL comms, meetings, and emails, many back and forth with government officials, he had an answer. Humans were late to join the collective. They had already started to build their empire when they encountered the collective. Humans were well into their third inhabited system, with several terraformed planets and several space elevators. Massive space stations hung in the orbit of all three systems. Humans were, in a strange twist for such a pervasive species, unaccustomed to seeking help, because they had never gotten it from anyone before. They had, as a species, achieved a level of colonization that no other races had, unaided. In the centuries that they had spent building new worlds to live on and populating new systems, they had built massive stores of technical skills and know-how. They had designed and redesigned redundant, self-sufficient systems. After joining the collective, they continued to develop those skills and add to the know-how. When they needed to build a space elevator or construct a space station, they just did it. To their way of thinking, there was no problem that needed solving, no question they could not answer. To them, it was just another day, another job, another paycheck. The human ambassador scheduled a new meeting with the Grebnel ambassador. After the niceties were out of the way, the human ambassador started to explain all of this to the Grebnel ambassador. I assure you, Ambassador Hambra, that it is not any sort of malicious intent on our part. I suppose after so many centuries of taking care of everything on our own, it just never occurred to us to ask for help. I suppose when it comes down to it, it's just us being stubbornly set in our ways. but for the sake of diplomacy, let's say that it's our spirit of self-reliance. End of story. This is a special thank you to the one, the only, the legendary Eric Hino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Estrella the Dreamer, Trygain95, Fudic Yol, Meridian117, Elysia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albard and Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.